Hello, friends and co-creators. Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I want to talk about the feminine, divine feminine energy, but also the toxic feminine energy, why the feminine is so often associated with sin, chaos, our darker side, our shadow elements, and also our greatest mysteries, and why this spiritual awakening is really being led by the feminine, but looking at that in a bigger picture, as is relevant for all of us, whether we are biologically men or women. So in this video, we're going to go through purification, why purification is really important when it comes to understanding the feminine energy, and also a big change in how oftentimes we hear these stories, especially today, that everything is a masculine problem. Some people call it the patriarchy. I call it outer authority. Why we're in toxic masculine energy. And what I invite you to consider in this particular chat today and to sit with afterwards is that there's no such thing as just being in one energy or the other. So if the feminine energy leads always, whether or not she is conscious, whether or not she understands, and when I'm referring to the feminine, by the way, in this particular aspect, yes, this to a certain degree will be stronger with biological women who identify with the feminine energy. However, it is relevant for all of us. The feminine aspect of us has always been leading. So the question is, are we conscious of it or not? And when we talk about the feminine rising, the divine feminine being born, why is she leading this awakening? And what does it have to do with purification? So let's dive in for a little bit. I'm going to try not to keep it pretty simple. And I really want to start with an interpretation of a very classic Christian symbols or Christian story. And I don't mean this in any kind of offense to the religion itself. I believe that a lot of truth is held within these stories, and unfortunately also a little bit of control. But I would like to speak to the part, that's my personal opinion, I would like to speak to the part that I think is massively powerful for us to understand. So we oftentimes think of, we have Mother Mary, and we have Mary Magdalene, and we have the birth of Christ, right? And the rising, or the Savior impulse, the Christ stream, that is balanced. But I want to pay attention to Mother Mary for a second, because they split the Marys. They both have the same name, right? We have Mother Mary and we have Mary Magdalene. Mother Mary is known for her purity, right? That she was this perfect feminine being. That she received seed, not from man, but from God. And this is actually really powerful to sit with for a minute, because I always asked myself when I heard the story, I thought, this is actually a very feminine story. This is actually this is really interesting, because the man is actually not a part of this divine creation, right? In the external storytelling. And I don't feel like that's really discussed very often. So I wanted to bring it forward in this particular talk. I want you to really just think about that. The idea of Mary is that she is pure, and she is able to receive seed, guidance, what must be created from a divine source instead of from the mind of man. And this is a key that I believe is important for all of us to recognize in this tradition. So I'm not even going to get into Mary Magdalene. Let's just sit with that part of the story for the purpose of today's little chat. The feminine impulse. The feminine is everything that is unknown, right? It is the subconscious, it is the fear, it's all of this stuff that's right at the top, our trauma that's not being dealt with. So there's like a layer, if we have that iceberg of how a human being's consciousness is set up. What is right, the top of the iceberg is conscious. That's energy, something that people are aware of, that they're using every single day, all the stories that they tell themselves where they think they're in power and in control. But right underneath that is a lot of our subconscious, our programming, how we mimic everything that actually has the reins underneath. Right? That layer, that subconscious layer, is actually what's running the show. We're not conscious of it, but it's actually what's running the show. And any kind of personal development, any sort of spiritual growth, and any teaching is going to dive into, is going to look at this. And of course, you sit with your own inner authority and you start contemplating, examining yourself, understanding why you take the action that you take in your life. You're going to start to tap into and play with and recognize that these other programs, these things that are set in the subconscious, are actually running your show. And then below that subconscious, below that kind of fear, this like tier of stuff that mostly we're going to say would be the not so good stuff, okay? Because that first layer tends to be pretty trauma oriented. And below that is when we start to get into the mystical aspects and what we would also call the feminine mysteries. It's what the feminine is actually able to connect to once she gets through that first layer, that first, that all of that kind of junk right there at the top. So when we are working on our feminine energy, when we are understanding how we become better, stronger co-creators in this, through the shift, when we are coming into inner authority, when we are shifting out of outer authority and coming into inner authority, one of the first steps that we have to consciously take and become aware of is embracing and remembering the feminine, how the feminine actually leads the show. And therefore, the feminine is the energy, is the vehicle, is what needs to awaken first. She's the one that needs love. She's the one that needs to be opened. She's the one that needs those trauma programs and all that kind of messy, sinful, chaotic, darkness, shadow aspects. All of that needs to be dealt with first so that it can be dissolved and relieved, or at least start to, because this is a long process, right? This doesn't happen overnight. But this layer is dissolved so that that source, that divine seed, that divine guidance from, call it source, God, divine creation law, Christ consciousness stream, but the higher, the more perfect, the more beautiful guidance and can begin to enter, so that the body of the feminine begins to fill with that energy, right? Instead of being in fear and quieted and ruled by this subconscious program and all of this icky stuff at the top. So what needs to happen? She needs to purify. This needs to be relieved. The vehicle and the temple that is that receives must be healed. The physical body must be healed. The emotional body must be healed, must be brought back into a coherent state that can properly receive divine guidance. The energetic body. We must have awareness of these different bodies. We must have awareness of the cleansing process of these different bodies. And there's no shame in any of this. This isn't about shaming women or shaming men or the bad of the feminine. No, the feminine is about to connect to something that that is power rising for all of us. Because once that true source energy can start to come in, once she can hold and she is sending through her subconscious field, through her energetic field, she's sending those codes. She's operating from those places. That's how she informs the masculine energy that can then take action and move it forward. Now we have a revolution. Now we have a spiritual, a consciousness revolution. But we have to first understand the feminine role in creation. We need to recognize that as individuals, no matter what our biological representation might be, as individuals, our feminine energy leads. And our job is to be conscious of it. Our job is to not have shame in that process, but we need to clear, we need to purify the vehicle. We need to purify the vehicle of reception and our field so that we are sending out a more coherent stream. We are tuning our vehicle. We're tuning our physical body, our emotional body, and our energetic body so that it is not a chaotic, disruptive stream that enters into a co-creative environment, but one that is clean, where the feminine can whisper into the masculine's ear something that is clear, of pure heart, inspired by divine source. And through that connection, right, the feminine whispers, the masculine is then competent, able to act, and then we'll talk more about the masculine energy. But in today's world, what I invite when we talk about this rebirth process is that so often when we start talking about the toxic masculine energy or the patriarchy, while these things are relevant, they can stop us from really embracing the power that is the feminine and that is within each of us today, no matter what. Because all of that can kind of focus, it thinks that the masculine can operate without a feminine energy, and this is not true. The feminine energy is always operating. So what we can do is not be in a toxic feminine energy. And that requires a purification, an ownership of our field, an ability to go through our traumas, to understand this purification process, to be able to set up that part of ourselves that can receive higher guidance and act upon it, and understand that the masculine energy will heal on its own once that feminine energy is sending out a higher source signal. So let's just leave it at that for today. I hope that was fun and a new way of thinking of, approaching co-creation. For women, I think it's very important, even though this again is just not fully related to our biological sexes. I am speaking more to a spiritual co-creation process, but at the same time, strong feminine energies, and if you do, the more aligned that we are, the more we will find that masculine energy around us aligns in the same way. And so never underestimate the power of purification, the power of the feminine to change almost every single dynamic. Don't ever take that power away from yourself. Never think that a masculine energy wants to or can control in some way that is beyond your own, that has power over you. That belief on its own is a problem. Not to say that it isn't true. When we believe it, it becomes very true. But do not underestimate your power. Do not underestimate your power to take back your own vehicle, to take back the energy that you are sending out on a subconscious, in a subconscious, energetic way, and how powerful that energy is. The more coherent that you are, the more that something is cleansed, and the more that it is grounded, the more that the divine is embodied, the less that this problem with others, right? It immediately invites other energy to transform. It inspires. It immediately starts to heal whatever might be a misaligned masculine energy on the outside. So let's stay empowered. Let's keep it in, let's keep things within what we can control. And I look forward to kind of hearing your thoughts on this topic, what resonates, where you have concerns, and continuing the dialogue in weeks to come. Oh, I will do a video also on different ways of purifying very soon. Okay, have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.